Hey everybody, this is the video retake discussion for the last CER that we took. So if you're retaking or if you're watching this video and retaking a test, you didn't score proficient or advanced. So this is going to be your opportunity to make some corrections and hopefully get your score up to proficiency. So this video is on the reasoning. Now the reasoning is going to be the longest part of the test, potentially, and it's a lot of times the most difficult part. Writing a claim is just a sentence. Finding the evidence, well, you do have to dig through the evidence and figure out what evidence ties your or supports your claim. But the reasoning ties everything together. Without a strong reasoning, your claim doesn't always work, or you don't have the correct evidence to support your claim. So the reasoning shows how or why the data counts as evidence. In other words, again, it's going to tie that evidence back to the claim. And the reasoning is where you explain that. Now, you do need to include a scientific principle whenever applicable. So here in class, if we give you scientific principles, make sure that you use them. The easiest way to correct your test, especially the reasoning, is if you have no scientific principle, it's automatically a developing or a beginning at best. So make sure you have a scientific principle. Make sure you have the correct ones. Now, when we looked at the scientific principles earlier, you saw there was 4 of them. Now, all 4 of these are true. Now, they don't all support the scientific principle. You can make an argument for 3 of them supporting the 3 of them supporting your evidence, so not scientific principle. So all 4 scientific principles are true. They're scientific principles. But which one of the 4 best supports the fact that your evidence supports your claim, or your evidence is tying your claim and making it true? It's tying it together. So let's look at each one. First of all forces come in pairs in opposite directions. All of that is saying is that when the table pushes up on the clock pushes back. When the earth is pulling down on the clock gravity, the clock is pulling back up. So that's true, but that has nothing to do with its motion. All it's saying is that forces come in pairs. It doesn't say anything about balance, and it's not talking about this pair, because this would have been over here. But in the free body diagram, we free it of any forces that don't impact the motion of a clock. So 1, not going to use. 2 says the beginning of motion is always caused by unbalanced forces. Now, if we think to ourselves, okay, in the claim, we wanted to know why the clock is not moving. Well, if it's not moving, there is no motion. But here it says all motion is caused by unbalanced forces. That's huge. You're definitely going to want to use 2. Now, if you don't use scientific principle number 2, you're not going to get a proficient. Could you make the argument that scientific principle number 3 applies? Forces that are applied to an object in opposite directions counteract each other. You could make that argument. You could say, well, if these 2 forces counteract each other, then the forces are balanced. And if they're balanced, according to number 2, you're not going to get motion. You can make that argument. And what I would say is you definitely need number 2. If you include number 3 as well as number 2, that's where you're going to start to go from that proficient grade up into an advanced grade. Now, could you use the 4th one? An object's motion is influenced only by the forces that are applied to it, not by the forces it applies to others. Again, you can make the argument and say, look, this is important and it should be included because it is only influenced by the forces that are applied to it. And because there are no horizontal forces applied to it, they cannot influence the motion of the clock. So there is no horizontal motion. So you can make the argument that 4 could be included in your reasoning as well. Absolutely. Again, you have to have number 2, because if those forces aren't there, realistically, they're both 0. There's 0 forces, so they're balanced. So again, we go back to 2. You have to have 2. Could you include 4? You could. Again, this is starting to get your score from a proficient up into an advanced. And if you use 2 to make your main argument and you included 3 and 4, this is how you're going to start to see those advanced scores. But you have to include number 2. Without it, you can't necessarily make the argument with these and be proficient in a score. Now, remember, when you write your reasoning, you have to include 4 parts. You have to restate the claim. You have to identify the scientific principle. You have to explain how the scientific principle connects the evidence to the claim. And you have to have a concluding statement verifying your claim. So let's give this a try. What was our claim? The clock is not moving because the vertical forces are both balanced and there are no horizontal forces acting on the clock. According to scientific principle number 2, the beginning of motion is always caused by unbalanced forces. So now I did the first 2 parts. I restated the claim, I identified the scientific principle. According to scientific principle number 2, the beginning of motion is always caused by unbalanced forces. So now, explain how the scientific principle connects the evidence to the claim. So again, let me restate that. The beginning of motion is always caused by unbalanced forces. Then I would go on to explain, we can see from the free body diagram that the vertical contact force of the table and the vertical non-contact force of the weight are both balanced and will not cause motion as a result. We can also see from the free body diagram that there are no horizontal forces acting on the clock, so those forces both must be 0 and balanced. So there I did. I explained how the scientific principle connects the evidence to the claim. So if you need to rewind the video so you can hear that a couple of times, so you can type that out, please do so. Now I have a concluding statement. So I might end it then by, therefore, because all balance or all forces are balanced, the clock will not move. So it's just a very simple sentence. Therefore, because all the forces are balanced, or you might say, therefore, because there are no unbalanced forces, the clock will not move. So it's just kind of wrapping everything up. So hopefully these videos have helped you with your CER, and hopefully you'll rewrite them so that I can give you a proficient score, that you earn a proficient score. So as always, if you have any questions, make sure you ask. Thanks.